G'day guys, welcome back. My name is Wildkard and you're watching Rugby News. And as always, it is my pleasure and privilege to entertain you here on YouTube. First up, World Rugby has announced the 12 referees of power going into the Rugby World Cup. So these 12 referees will be managing the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, let's go through them and let's talk about what's going to happen. First up, Nika Ashukeli, a Georgian referee who knows the rule book like the back of his hand. Very, very clinical, very few mistakes, and very, very good selections here. On the other hand, someone who I actually have a lot of respect for, Wayne Barnes from England is also selected. He has been not very popular in the South African areas, but I actually think he's a very, very good referee. Absorbing tackle aside, he's a very, very good referee. Nick Berry is my pick to eliminate France at the Rugby World Cup as the Australian selective. Andrew Brace, a referee from Ireland who's been really, really good as well. He kind of reminds me of Nigel Owens. Is it just me? His voice actually sounds very similar to Nigel Owens. I actually thought he's reminded me of Nigel Owens, just the way he talks, just his voice, the sound of his voice is very similar to me. Matthew Carley from England, someone I think is okay. He's okay. Carl Dixon is someone that another English referee who I felt like maybe a little bit undercooked. I do think that he's sometimes, his decision making is a little bit too strict at times. Like he kind of very trigger happy with when it comes to giving out yellow and red cards without critical thinking sometimes, in my opinion. Angus Garner, an excellent Australian referee. I think he's the best Australian referee. Probably one of the best referees in the world, Angus Garner, and in fact, a lot of you South Africans will agree with that. Ben O'Keefe, the best referee in New Zealand, and again, he's been very, very good in managing the Super Rugby referee, the level of Super Rugby referee here in the Southern Hemisphere. Luke Pearce, another English referee who's been exceptionally well, good for as a referee coming out of England. I think he's probably the best English referee if Wayne Barnes is not considered the best. Due to recent controversies, and the one and only South African referee is Jaco Piper, the guy that issued a red card for Freddie Stewart, the wrong red card that was rescinded after the match. So yeah, Jaco Piper gets the South African referee, and Matthew Renaud, the only French referee, despite this is playing in France, he's the only French referee been selected. Matthew Renaud. And finally, Paul Williams, the New Zealand referee. Actually, we saw him do an excellent job between the Reds and the Chiefs game on the weekend, where he made a very, I thought was a very ballsy call at the end of the match, where Chiefs had a penalty advantage in front of the try line, and when the Chiefs was basically played on the penalty advantage for about 10-15 phases, and then eventually got held over the try line. Paul Williams actually had the balls to come out and call that advantage over, which is I've never seen that before. No referee had the balls to say that when there's a penalty advantage. And this was in the dying minutes of the game, so the game ended when this penalty advantage was deemed over, when it was held over the ball was held over the try line. So that was a huge decision by Paul Williams, and I was really applauding his performance there as a referee. And with that being said, the assistances, I think the one thing that I kind of highlight here that we want to talk about is the TMOs, right? The two TMOs that we kind of want to talk about is Brendan Pickerel is a New Zealand referee. I feel like in Super Rugby we're hearing quite a bit. It's a thing when, if everybody remembers you, Brendan Pickerel is actually a really good referee on field, but I do feel like when he's actually a really good normal referee, but because of the fact that he gets the TMO role, I feel like he sometimes tries to run the game a bit too much, try to interject himself a bit too much, as if he is the main referee. And then the other guy, Marius Jonker, everybody knows him already by now, one of the most controversial TMOs in the world. But regardless, we think that he tries his best to do his job. So with that being said, people are obviously not happy. There is 4 English referees being selected, whilst there are many regions of the world didn't even get one, such as Scotland, Italy, or Wales, didn't even get a single referee. So obviously, the one referee that I felt like maybe could have replaced one of the English referees, maybe Dixon or Carley Crawley, what's his name? Carly or Crawley? What's his name? How do you say his name? Yeah, maybe Dixon or Carly is obviously Mike Adamson from Scotland. I thought he could potentially had a run. He has been very high on the World Rugby's pecking order in terms of giving 6 opportunities in 6 nations, giving opportunities to URC, giving opportunities to Champions Cup. He's not the best referee, but I feel like if you wanted to, in terms of his performance between the other two, I feel like he probably could be, to be just as good. The one good thing about having 4 English referees is that even World Rugby knows that England's gonna get eliminated early, right? So they can just pull the English referees to run all the elimination rounds all the way to the finals without having to worry about any conflict of interest, right? That's why they have 4 English referees, because it's gonna be, if you think about it, it could be like, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, and then France, maybe even Ireland in the quarterfinals. Who else is gonna be available, right? It's just gonna be English referees for all those matches. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. So even World Rugby knows England's gonna get eliminated early. So I think that's a positive sign. That's a positive sign going to Rugby World Cup. That there's 4 English referees, because it means that the team is not gonna do very well. And obviously we're talking about Jacob Piper. He is obvious. He's the only South African referee that's been very prominent in recent times, and it's just been given a lot of opportunities to hone, to improve his skills. Obviously, that controversial decision with the red card against Freddie Stewart in the 6 Nations was really one of the sour spots in his career. But I think he's really good as a referee overall. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, so he's obviously been given a lot of confidence by World Rugby. He will be refereeing the Champions Cup, which is the European Champions Cup final between La Rochelle and Leinster. And then Barnsley will be refereeing the Challengers Cup, which is the losers bracket, essentially the losers bracket and the winners bracket. So yeah, in terms of pecking order by World Rugby, Jaco Piper is above Barnsley, who is, the best referee in the world for a very long time. Obviously, some big news that came out literally today, right? Earlier today, there was the Dragons. The Dragons NRL team head coach has been sacked today. And already people are throwing their hats into the mix to potentially try to secure the position in the NRL. And there's been some talks that one of the Cheika's representative has contacted the club, made sure that made an expression of interest to potentially coaching rugby league team here in I guess in Sydney. Illawarra is like south of Sydney. And so he will be coaching Dragons potentially. But at the moment, it's very unlikely. There's some talks that are very unlikely that he will be getting the job, because there are a few intricate, there's a lot of movements around the coaching area in rugby league. First up is Jason Riles, who is one of the runners-up coaches for potentially take over the head coaching role here for the Dragons. He's a former player. And he's currently assistant coaching the Sydney Roosters. So he literally had a meeting with the team last week before the announcement was made. So there's a very good chance that he's going to be taking over the role. He's spoken to the Roosters, and he literally had a preliminary meeting that came out of the news last week that he was meeting with the Dragons, so he could be going. And also Ben Hornby, another guy who potentially be taking over. Hornby was the guy that was supposed to take over. He was supposed to take over potentially the Melbourne Storm. So there was a big news this week as well that Craig Bellamy has signed on to Melbourne Storm for another year. He was supposedly going to retire. He kind of announced that he was going to retire early in the season, but he's not going to. And Hornby was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be a guy that was supposed to take over, was considering taking over the Storm's job, but at the moment he's also talking to obviously the Storm job is no longer available. He's now being considered for the Dragons job. So obviously there was some more talks about Suali'i. So the Roosters is in a bit of a weird situation. This is a bit of rugby league news. Obviously, Rugby Union has come out and said, hey, if you're going to sack Suali'i, we're happy to take him over. And Trent Robinson was offered a job last week as well by Rugby Australia to switch over and coach Rugby Union. I don't think anybody will be clamoring for a Rugby Union coaching job here in Australia anytime soon. But yes, Trent Robinson kind of came out. He's the head coach of Sydney Roosters. You know, he's won 2 premierships with Sydney Roosters, right? Like, he's not a chump. He's absolutely knows exactly what he's talking about. He kind of came out and said that what Rugby Australia is doing is it's lacking a little bit of class, and he's in no way, shape, or form looking at sacking Suali'i anytime soon. With that being said, he is under a lot of more pressure now this week following the flogging that these Roosters suffered on the weekend to the Panthers. They got like flogged 60 something points, I think. Oh, it was a huge flogging. I watched a little bit of it and it was so bad. I actually turned it off. And again, Suali'i's performance wasn't that great. $4.8 million Rugby Australia pay for Suali'i in a losing effort. So next up, Eddie Jones has finalized his coaching role for the rugby for the Wallabies. So the few new additions to the team. So Brad Davis is nabbed as an attacking coach. Dan Palmer and Barry Barnes has been added into the coaching staff. So Brad Davis coached at the London Irish previously, and he will be joining in as a what was he going to be? He's going to be an assistant coach, and then the ex-Wallaby Dan Palmer is going to be the line-out coach alongside Neil Hatley. The scrum coach, Hatley, will joining up the Wallabies, finishing with season in the Baths. So Hatley is currently at the Baths. And finally, Barry Barnes will be a part-time kicking coach. And then there will be Pierre-Henry Bronken is appointed as the more consultant, and John Clark is the strength and conditioning coach. That'll finish up the Eddie Jones setup for his Wallabies coaching group. Next up, the All Blacks has made a big announcement this week. A couple of big announcements actually this week. First up is that they will be they're going into a deal with Japanese rugby, and they will be playing regular test matches with Japan going into next year to all the way to 2027. So they signed basically a deal with Japan Rugby. So that means that there will be a regular fixture for Japan to potentially beat the All Blacks for the first time ever. It's gonna happen within the next few years. It's happening. Japan's gonna beat the All Blacks at some point. So that's basically a big green light go ahead for both teams. And also there's some possibility that Japan League One teams will be able to play games against Super Rugby Pacific teams as well. So that's something that's good to look forward to. And then some more news from New Zealand Rugby as well. Ethan Blackadder has resigned. Someone has been injured a little bit last year. I was very high on Ethan Blackadder. He is absolutely spectacular for the All Blacks in that a blindside flanker position. Oh yeah, actually he plays open side. I think it's open or blindside. But yeah, he has been not blindside. He's been spectacular for the All Blacks, and I'm really good to see him, re-sign to 2025 and being healthy. That's probably the most important. Another guy who just came back from injury as well and re-signed with New Zealand Rugby is Antoine Leonard-Brown. He has also re-signed with New Zealand Rugby to 2026. He's someone that's been injured for a very long time, just on and off injured. He finally got his 100th Super Rugby cap after like 2 years of injury, essentially. And he's also that really important position for the All Blacks outside centre. So yeah, Riku Ioane probably not going to get the spot in the All Blacks jersey with Anton Leonard-Brown in the mix for that spot. So Dalton Papali'i on the weekend, obviously in the Blues game where they got kind of like, convincingly beaten by the Crusaders. He was put on a high shot on Richie Mo'unga, and he was given a red card, and he has been suspended for 3 weeks from the high shot, Dalton Papali'i. And obviously the weekend was a huge weekend for rugby for Australia as well. The Reds has beaten the undefeated Chiefs in New Zealand. This was in a different venue in New Zealand. This was in New Plymouth in New Zealand. not the traditional ground for the Chiefs, but still, New Zealand, it's still home ground regardless. And 25-22, and this one was well. This is where Paul Williams, the Chiefs had an opportunity, penalty advantage, could have gone back for the 3 points and leveled the game, and avoided the loss. But the Chiefs went on to try to score a try, and eventually they were held up over the try line, and Paul Williams deemed that sufficient enough of a penalty advantage been taken. Therefore, the game was over. So that was, I thought that was a big ballsy decision by the referee, something that I've never seen before. So yeah, Paul Williams being selected to be a referee at the Rugby World Cup is huge for his career, and he's done really well this this match between the Reds and the Chiefs. So next up, the URC Semi-Finals happened on the weekend. The Stormers beat Connacht at home, 43 points to 25, quite convincingly. And then the Leinster, the big upset, Leinster at home, losing to Munster, their rivals, 15 points to 16. There was a drop goal in the last dying, couple of minutes of the game to win the game for Munster, to kind of take the lead from Munster. And so the final, the URC final, coming up this Sunday will be, is it this Sunday or next Sunday? I think it's this Sunday, maybe next Sunday. It's the Stormers versus Munster. This will be in South Africa once again. So Stormers looking to win the URC 2 years in a row. And Munster will be very, very difficult task to win any games in South Africa. And obviously, the semi-finals saw 47,000 people showed up to watch what many thought would be the last home game for the Stormers, because they were expecting to go to Ireland to play Leinster. But because Munster has been in Leinster, there was a lot of celebrations in South Africa, because the game is going to be in, the final game will be in South Africa once again. And they're going to be expecting even bigger crowd to turn up for the weekend, for the final that's coming up in a couple weeks. And obviously Rassie Erasmus has been, there was a lot of speculations that he was going to take over the Springboks head coaching role, with Jackson Inamba going to Ireland after Rugby World Cup this year. So there was some speculations that Rassie will be taking over the head coaching role, because the Springboks hasn't been looking at a new head coaching role. And there were some rumors that Dwayne the Rock Vermeulen was going to be taking over the head coaching role, but that's probably not going to be the case. The Rassie Erasmus basically just came out and said, "Don't believe everything you hear." Probably all I can say. So there's whether he's referring to Dwayne Vermeulen being selected as coach, or whether he was going to get appointed as the coach, we're not sure exactly what he means. But he has come out publicly stated a few weeks ago now, I think, that he's not in charge of selecting or appointing head coaches. So he has no say in who's going to be the Springboks head coach. It's not his decision. And next up, we've got Matt Proudfoot, the former England coach, will be joining the Lions, the Cats in South Africa as a forwards coach. So that's a good news for South Africa. Next up, obviously, yes, there was some, the Munster has put up a huge upset over Leinster. One of the key players, Joey Carbery, was not even selected for the bench. So and he was not injured. So yeah, there was a lot of talks about the future of the Joey Carbery's career. He has been left out of the Six Nations this year, and now he's been left out of the his team at Munster. So yeah, there was some talk. He was, when Johnny Sexton was injured, he was considered to be the next big number 10 for Ireland. But yeah, there is a lot of disappointment in his part. So we've already talked about this. Munster beating Leinster in a drop goal. But let's move on. So yes, the Super Rugby, another huge game, and a huge result on the weekend, is the Western Force beating the Fijian Endura with a bonus point win, saw them jumping themselves back up to 8th, I think, and pushing the Enduras out of the top 8. So this was a big loss for the Fijians, following the huge win at home against the Hurricanes. The Fijians got to finish off the season strong to try to make that top 8. They've got, so this was a huge kind of like a bit of a letdown for the Fijian fans, but a huge move for the Western Force, potentially making the top 8 this year. With that being said, there was some issues in Fiji Rugby Union. The FRU, obviously, last week, their board was forced to resign by the Governor General of Fiji, and basically now, the Fijiana Jura team was basically had the finances cut off by the Fijian Rugby Union. So the Rugby Australia actually paid for Fijiana's finals game, finals performance against the Reds. So the Fijiana the girls were actually, not getting food from Fiji Rugby Union. So the Rugby Australia has to step in to take over that issue. But yeah, with that being said, there was a lot of financial issues at Fiji Rugby Union. The World Rugby has officially moved in to stabilize the union, and there's a lot of issue from Fiji Rugby Union. They did have a big, I think they had a big new sponsor from Fiji Water a couple weeks ago. So they are getting a lot of money in from that, but there is a lot of issues in terms of management. But that is that. And also, like I mentioned before, the All Blacks will be looking at playing Fiji next year in July. So they will be playing England and then playing Fiji next year. And then there's some talks that they will potentially plan a match with Fiji to be played in Fiji. So the first time ever, the All Blacks is going to be playing in Fiji against the Fijian national team, and that'll be a historic match for them. And maybe a historical day to see the All Blacks. Anyway, let's move on. All Blacks something. So the English Premiership has finished as well in the season. The finals are coming up with the Sails Sharks beating the Leicester Tigers 21 points to 13, and the Saracens beating Northampton Saints 38 points to 15. And this means that the Saracens will be hosting the Sails Shark with a big comeback late in the season. I feel like with there was a lot of talk about Malo Tuilangi's future and stuff, and they managed to come up with money to secure him. But yeah, the Saracens will be playing against the Sharks for the Premiership finals in a couple of weeks. And former All Blacks Charles Piutau will be heading to Japan after his stint in France. He's been signed to the Shizuoka Blue Revs, and he'll be starting after the Rugby World Cup at the end of this year, and 23-24 season. And finally, the last bit of news is that 3 more countries has been added to the World Rugby memberships, I guess you could call it, and that's Nepal, Qatar, and Turkey has become an official member in the annual meeting in the World Rugby Council. And that is the news from last week, guys. So let me know your thoughts on any of the articles. Let me know if you got any. Let me know anything in the comments. I'll read all of them. And as always, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. I'll see you guys later this week for the reviews, and have a good week. Cheers.